She imagined the days when the lake had been a shared place, a retreat for laughter and conversation, when her husband had held her hand and they had watched their son, Daniel, play along the shore, splashing water without a care. And she felt a pang of longing for that simpler, happier time, the kind of longing that made her chest tighten and her eyes sting with unshed tears. But she did not dwell on the pain. Instead, she focused on the sensations around her, the warmth of the sun on her arms, the softness of the towel beneath her, the gentle sway of the dock under her weight, the smell of fresh water mixed with pine and earth. And she felt a flicker of contentment that had been missing for months. Just as she was beginning to truly settle into the quiet comfort of being alone with her thoughts, she heard footsteps approaching, light and hesitant, and she opened her eyes to see her son, Daniel, standing a few feet away, holding 2 bottles of lemonade, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the dock. He looked different somehow, more grown, more certain, and yet still the boy she remembered in small glimpses, and the sight of him brought a smile to her lips she hadn't felt in a long time. "I thought you might want one," he said softly, offering her a bottle, and his voice, familiar and steady, made her heart ache in a good way, a gentle reminder that life continued around her, that there were moments of connection still waiting to be found. Claire reached out to take the bottle, her fingers brushing against his, and she felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest, not romantic, not something forbidden, but human, the deep comfort of being seen and cared for. And she realized how long it had been since she had shared even a simple gesture like this with someone she loved. Daniel sat down beside her, careful to leave a respectful space, and together they watched the water, not speaking at first, letting the silence hold them, filling it with the unspoken acknowledgement of shared grief, of moments missed, of a love that had transformed but not disappeared. Claire thought about the years since her husband's death, about how she and Daniel had clung to each other in different ways, how they had both carried their pain silently, how they had learned to navigate life alone yet together, and she felt a quiet pride in the man he had become and a renewed sense of hope for herself. The sun climbed higher, casting bright reflections across the lake, and she noticed the way Daniel's eyes softened when he looked at her, the way his presence made the air feel lighter, the way his quiet companionship filled a space in her heart she hadn't realized was still empty. Claire thought about how life was unpredictable, how grief and joy could coexist in the same moment, and how this morning, so simple and ordinary, had the power to remind her of both. She felt a sense of anticipation, a gentle pull in her chest, knowing that this small moment by the lake could mark the beginning of something, a renewed closeness with her son, a chance to rediscover herself, a quiet step toward healing that didn't require grand gestures, only presence, and attention, and the willingness to let herself feel again. And as she took a long sip of lemonade, savoring the cool sweetness, she realized that sometimes the most profound experiences could arrive quietly, without warning, in the form of a shared glance, a gentle gesture, the sound of footsteps approaching on a dock, or the simple fact that someone you love is right there beside you, and in that realization, she felt a stir of hope, a sense of peace she hadn't known in years, and a quiet excitement for what the rest of the day might bring, even though she had no idea that her world was about to shift in ways she had never imagined, all beginning with a morning by the lake and the unexpected presence of her son at her side. Daniel sat beside Claire on the dock, the sun warming their shoulders, the breeze gently moving the strands of hair around their faces, and for the first time in weeks, Claire felt the quiet comfort of someone close without the tension of expectation or the weight of unspoken grief hanging heavily between them. He handed her the bottle of lemonade, and she accepted it with a small smile, noticing how his hand lingered for a brief moment before he pulled it back, almost like a silent acknowledgement of their shared history, of the many years he had grown up under her careful watch, and of the distance that had formed between them as he had become a man with responsibilities, a life outside the house, and yet here he was, choosing to spend a morning with her in silence, as though no time had passed at all. Claire turned her gaze back to the lake, watching the light dance on the water's surface, reflecting tiny sparks of gold and blue, and she felt a strange combination of nostalgia and hope, realizing that life had a way of giving moments that felt suspended in time, moments that allowed the heart to catch up with itself, to remember that connection, warmth, and presence were still possible even after the deepest losses. Daniel finally broke the silence, his voice soft, carrying a mixture of thoughtfulness and vulnerability that made Claire's heart tighten in a familiar way, the way it always did when he spoke of feelings he didn't often reveal. "I used to come here with Dad all the time," he said, his eyes tracing the far edge of the lake where the trees met the water, their green mirrored perfectly in the calm surface, and Claire nodded, swallowing a lump in her throat, remembering the laughter, the quiet conversations, the fishing rods, the sandwiches they had packed, and how safe and complete those days had felt when her family had been whole. Daniel looked back at her then, meeting her eyes, and she saw the same longing she felt reflected there, a longing not just for the past but for moments of closeness that life had almost stolen from them both, and in that instant, the silence between them became not empty but meaningful, filled with memory, understanding, and unspoken love that was neither romantic nor inappropriate, only deeply human, the kind that comes from years of shared history and emotional connection. They talked about small things first, the weather, the ducks gliding across the water, the way the wind made the reeds sway, but gradually the conversation grew deeper, more personal, as Daniel began to share some of his fears, the ones he usually kept buried behind a confident exterior. He spoke about leaving home for work, the pressure of making the right decisions, and the uncertainty of the future, and Claire listened without interrupting, feeling an odd mix of pride and sadness, seeing the young man he had become, strong yet quietly burdened by responsibilities and self-doubt, and realizing that while she had tried to protect him from the pain of life, he had learned to navigate it in ways she could never fully imagine. She told him about her own struggles too, about the emptiness that followed her through each day, the nights when the house felt unbearably silent, the moments when memories of her husband brought both comfort and heartbreak, and as she spoke, Daniel listened with that rare attentiveness only a child who truly respects their parent can have, nodding, asking gentle questions, offering small reassurances that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't for years. The sun climbed higher, painting everything with a warm, golden hue, and the dock beneath them seemed to hold them in a private world, a little bubble where past and present mingled and where their shared grief and love became a bridge instead of a barrier. Claire noticed the small gestures he made, how he adjusted the towel so she could sit comfortably, how he poured a little lemonade into his own bottle before drinking, how he occasionally glanced at her with a softness that reminded her she had raised someone thoughtful, kind, and emotionally aware, and her heart swelled with a mixture of love, nostalgia, and quiet relief, realizing that despite the hardships, despite the loss, she and Daniel had found a way back to each other in a space of trust and emotional intimacy that was nurturing rather than overwhelming. They began sharing memories, recounting moments both funny and touching, the time Daniel had fallen into the lake trying to catch a frog, the afternoon they had gotten lost hiking and laughed until their sides hurt, the evenings spent telling stories around the fireplace, and in each memory, Claire felt the bittersweet sweetness of joy mingled with sorrow, the knowledge that those moments were gone yet alive in the bond she and Daniel still shared. The conversation shifted naturally to the present, his work, his friends, her days, her attempts to rebuild a life she hadn't known how to live alone, and with each word, each glance, each shared laugh or quiet sigh, the emotional weight that had been pressing on her chest seemed to lift slightly, replaced with a sense of understanding, acceptance, and the tender reassurance that they were there for each other, without judgment or expectation. Claire noticed the small details around them, things she hadn't really seen in months, the gentle ripple of water lapping against the dock, the way the sun glinted off Daniel's hair, the distant call of a loon across the lake, the fresh scent of pine mixed with the earthy smell of water and sand, and these details grounded her in the moment, reminding her that life could be savored in small, quiet ways, even when it had been cruel or lonely in the past. As they sat side by side, sharing lemonade and stories, Claire felt a subtle shift within herself, a realization that her relationship with her son had matured into something beautiful and resilient, something that could provide comfort and companionship, and that this morning, simple as it was, marked a turning point in how she viewed her own healing, her ability to trust again, and her willingness to embrace life's small joys without fear of loss or sorrow. Daniel's presence beside her was calming, grounding, and strangely energizing, as though by simply sitting there and talking, they had created a sanctuary of understanding where words and glances carried more meaning than any grand gestures ever could. The sun climbed toward midday, and a warm glow bathed everything, making the water sparkle, making Daniel's face shine with quiet energy, making Claire feel alive in a way she hadn't felt for a long time, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and tender emotional closeness that was almost intoxicating in its simplicity. She realized that while she had come to the lake expecting solitude, she had found instead a companion, someone who could share her thoughts and feelings, someone who could listen without judgment, someone who reminded her that human connection could be healing in itself, and that even after tragedy, even after years of solitude, love and care could still be found in unexpected places. Daniel's gentle presence and careful words created a space where Claire could relax, breathe, and feel truly understood, the kind of understanding that doesn't demand answers or fix problems, but simply honors the reality of what has been and what is still possible, and she felt a renewed sense of hope that perhaps her life was not just about surviving grief, but about rediscovering the warmth of closeness and the joy of shared moments, however small or ordinary they might seem. They stayed on the dock for hours, talking, laughing quietly, watching the sunlight dance across the lake, sharing memories and present worries alike, and with every passing minute, Claire felt a deeper connection forming, a bond that was comforting, reassuring, and profoundly human, and she realized that healing didn't always come in dramatic moments but often arrived slowly, gently, through simple presence, through quiet conversation, through the shared recognition that someone else cared enough to sit beside you, to share in your silence, and to make the world feel a little less lonely. By the time the afternoon light began to soften, Claire felt a fullness of heart she hadn't known in years, a quiet excitement for the days ahead, and an awareness that this morning by the lake, just sitting beside her son, sharing lemonade and memories, had offered her something priceless, the knowledge that love, connection, and emotional closeness were still possible, and that perhaps, slowly but surely, she could begin to open herself to life again, one small, meaningful moment at a time. As the afternoon sun began to lower toward the horizon, painting the lake in shades of gold and pink, Claire and Daniel continued their quiet conversation on the dock, the water shimmering with each movement of the breeze. And something shifted between them in a way that neither had expected, a deepening of connection born not from words alone but from the shared acknowledgement of their past, their losses, and the fragile hope that the future might hold more gentle moments together. Daniel spoke more openly now, his voice steady but carrying a quiet intensity, as he shared details about the challenges he faced at work, the uncertainty he felt about his next steps in life, and the pressure of growing up in a world that often seemed unforgiving, and Claire listened without interruption, feeling her heart swell with empathy and pride at the man he had become, the resilience he had shown, and the way he had carried his responsibilities with courage she knew was rare for someone so young. She told him about her own moments of doubt, the times when grief threatened to overwhelm her, the nights she had lain awake thinking of her husband and wondering if she could ever feel fully alive again, and as she spoke, she felt the bond between them strengthen, the kind of emotional closeness that comes from complete honesty, from letting another person see the truth of your heart without fear of judgment or rejection. Their conversation moved seamlessly from fears to dreams, from the sorrow of the past to small joys of the present, and each shared word seemed to create a bridge over the gap that years of routine, responsibility, and unspoken emotions had built between them, leaving them connected not just as mother and son but as two people who had survived hardship together and found solace in each other's presence. Claire noticed the subtle gestures Daniel made, the way he adjusted the towel so they both could sit comfortably, the way he sipped his lemonade slowly as if savoring the moment, the occasional glance he gave her that held warmth, care, and quiet admiration, and she realized that these small acts were more meaningful than any grand expression of love, for they conveyed attention, presence, and the unspoken promise of support that could carry them through life's ups and downs. They laughed together at shared memories, like the time Daniel had tried to skip stones and ended up falling into the water, the afternoon they had gotten caught in a sudden rainstorm and had to dash for cover, laughing until their clothes were soaked and sticking to their skin, and even these simple stories carried the weight of nostalgia, the sweetness of joy remembered, and the unspoken acknowledgement that life, even when difficult, still offered moments of pure connection. As the sky deepened into warmer hues, Claire felt the emotions that had been quietly building inside her, longing, care, and a renewed sense of hope, mixing with the comfort of knowing that her son, though grown, still needed her as much as she needed him. though perhaps in different ways now, and that their relationship could evolve into something even more beautiful and supportive than before, something that healed wounds rather than reminding them of loss. Daniel spoke about his dreams, about places he wanted to travel, about goals he wanted to reach, and Claire encouraged him, offering insights and gentle guidance, but also learning from him, realizing that his perspective, his resilience, and his optimism were teaching her how to see the world again with lighter eyes, with a willingness to embrace possibility even after so much sorrow. The dock felt like a private sanctuary, the water reflecting both the colors of the sky and the depth of their emotions, and in that shared space, Claire felt the weight of grief lift slightly, replaced by a sense of intimacy and trust that was powerful precisely because it was so simple, so grounded in reality, and so free from pretense. She noticed how Daniel's presence made her feel alive again in ways she hadn't felt for years, the gentle warmth in her chest, the flutter of anticipation at seeing his expressions, the deep comfort of knowing that he cared enough to sit quietly beside her, sharing his thoughts and listening to hers, without demanding more than the moment itself could offer. As the minutes passed, their conversation turned to life's small wonders, the way sunlight sparkled on water, the pattern of leaves in the wind, the sound of a distant loon calling across the lake, and these seemingly ordinary observations became profoundly moving. A reminder that connection and beauty were always present if one took the time to notice them, and that healing could come not from dramatic changes but from the quiet act of being together and fully present. Claire shared a few fears she had about moving forward, about opening her heart to new experiences, about letting herself feel joy again after loss, and Daniel responded with patience and understanding, showing not just empathy but wisdom beyond his years, encouraging her to embrace life without guilt, to trust in herself, and to believe that moments of happiness were not betrayals of the past but celebrations of resilience and love. They talked about their family, their friends, the people who had influenced their lives, and in each topic, there was a gentle weaving of shared memories and reflections, a tapestry of connection that made Claire feel the strength of their bond in a way that was comforting, inspiring, and quietly transformative. The sun continued to lower, casting a soft, golden glow that highlighted Daniel's face, his thoughtful expressions, the way his eyes lit up when he smiled, and Claire couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in herself, the way her heart felt lighter, the way her worries seemed smaller, the way her ability to hope and feel joy had returned not all at once but in these incremental, tender steps that the morning had begun and the afternoon had carried forward. As the sky moved toward dusk, a gentle breeze stirred, carrying the fresh scent of water and pine, and Claire realized that her life, though scarred by loss, was still capable of moments of profound beauty, of emotional richness, and of connection that could soothe the heart and nourish the soul, and that these moments were not dependent on grand gestures but on the simple presence of someone who understood, someone who cared, someone who could sit beside her quietly and let words and silences weave a bond stronger than either had imagined. She saw in Daniel's face a reflection of her own growth, her own resilience, and her own capacity to love and be loved in ways that were gentle, supportive, and deeply human. And she understood that the path to healing was not about forgetting the past but about embracing the present, honoring their shared memories, and allowing themselves to build a new emotional closeness that neither time nor grief could take away. They remained on the dock as the light softened further, talking, laughing, sometimes sitting in thoughtful silence, the air around them filled with warmth, the subtle scent of water and earth, and a feeling that this shared moment, though ordinary in appearance, carried extraordinary meaning. A quiet revelation that life could still offer connection, care, and understanding in its purest forms. Claire felt a swell of gratitude for the unexpected intimacy of the afternoon, a sense of emotional renewal, and a quiet excitement for the future, knowing that this bond with her son was not fleeting but enduring, that it could support them both through life's challenges, and that the simple act of sharing presence, stories, and feelings could transform their relationship into something more profound than she had dared to imagine. As the last rays of sun kissed the water, Claire felt her heart open to possibilities she had almost forgotten existed, a gentle hope that life could still be tender, meaningful, and emotionally rich, and she knew that while the dock would eventually empty, the lake would continue to reflect the beauty of the moment, a symbol of the connection, understanding, and quiet love she and Daniel had nurtured together on that golden afternoon. And as they finally stood to leave, she sensed that this was not an ending but a beginning, a prelude to more shared moments, deeper conversations, and the slow, steady healing that comes when two hearts, shaped by grief but filled with love, choose to meet each other with openness, honesty, and unwavering care. As the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the lake and turning the sky into a canvas of deep oranges and soft purples, Claire and Daniel finally rose from the dock, stretching after hours of shared conversation, laughter, and quiet reflection, and she realized how much lighter she felt in his presence. The weight of grief and loneliness she had carried for years now softened by the comfort of connection, by the knowledge that her son, though grown, still valued these moments with her, and that they had created a space where both could be fully themselves without pretense or expectation, a space where emotional honesty and tenderness thrived naturally. As they walked back toward the small cabin at the edge of the lake, the wooden boards creaking under their feet, Claire noticed the subtle shift in Daniel's demeanor, the relaxed way he moved, the ease in his posture, the gentle smile that seemed to linger on his lips, and she felt a quiet joy, realizing that these hours had given him something too, a chance to pause, to reflect, to share, and to reconnect with her in a way that strengthened the invisible thread of love and understanding that had always bound them together but had grown frayed over time and distance. The evening air was cool now, carrying the fresh scent of pine and water, and the first stars began to appear, delicate points of light reflected faintly in the calm surface of the lake, and Claire felt a deep sense of peace, a recognition that life, with all its unpredictability and pain, also offered moments of grace, of emotional closeness, and of gentle reassurance that the heart could still be open, still feel warmth, and still embrace hope. Daniel paused at the cabin door, holding it open for her with a small, thoughtful gesture, and she noticed the care in his eyes, the unspoken understanding that these small acts mattered, that presence mattered, and that connection was more meaningful when nurtured through attention, empathy, and shared experiences, and she felt a swell of gratitude, knowing that this day by the lake, so simple in its unfolding, had become a turning point in their relationship, marking the beginning of a renewed bond built on trust, love, and mutual understanding rather than mere routine or obligation. Inside the cabin, the familiar warmth of home greeted them, the smell of freshly baked bread from the oven mingling with the lingering scent of the lake, and Claire felt a comforting familiarity that allowed her heart to settle further, to embrace the present fully, knowing that her life, though scarred by loss, still held moments of joy, connection, and gentle emotional fulfillment that could sustain her in ways she had nearly forgotten existed. Daniel moved around the kitchen, preparing simple sandwiches and pouring glasses of lemonade, and Claire watched him with a mixture of pride and affection, realizing that he had grown into a thoughtful, capable man, yet still one who appreciated small moments of closeness, who valued shared presence, and who could create warmth in the simplest ways, a reminder that love and care were expressed not only through grand gestures but through attention, thoughtfulness, and quiet acts of kindness that nourished the heart over time. They ate together, sharing stories of past summers, funny mishaps, and cherished memories, laughing in ways that felt effortless and natural, and Claire marveled at how their bond had deepened so quickly, strengthened by vulnerability, openness, and the willingness to share both joy and sorrow without fear of judgment, and she realized that this was the essence of emotional connection, the ability to be seen fully, to be heard deeply, and to be valued simply for being present. After dinner, they moved to the porch, sitting side by side in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear above the darkening lake, their reflections glimmering on the water, and Claire felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, recognizing that moments like this, though ordinary in appearance, held extraordinary power, the power to heal, to restore hope, and to remind the heart that it could feel fully alive again after pain and loss. She noticed the way Daniel glanced at her occasionally, a soft warmth in his eyes, and she felt that same warmth reciprocated in her chest, not romantic but deeply emotional, the kind that strengthens family bonds, nurtures trust, and reminds both parent and child that they are never truly alone, that love remains even when life has shifted in unexpected ways, and that the heart has an enduring capacity for care, tenderness, and hope. As the night deepened, they shared small confessions, fears about the future, hopes for happiness, dreams yet unfulfilled, and each revelation, each gentle admission, wove their hearts together in a quiet, intimate tapestry of understanding. reinforcing the knowledge that they could rely on each other, that vulnerability could be safe, and that emotional closeness could be both healing and comforting, a balm for past wounds and a foundation for future resilience. Claire realized that this day by the lake, from the first hesitant moment when Daniel joined her, through hours of conversation, shared memories, and reflective silence, had changed something fundamental in her life. It had reminded her that she could trust again, that she could feel joy and warmth without fear, and that her heart, though shaped by grief, still had room for love, connection, and the gentle pleasure of shared experience. A realization that lifted her spirit in a way she had not felt in years and left her feeling quietly triumphant in the face of loss. Daniel noticed her thoughtful silence and reached out briefly to brush a strand of hair from her face, a gesture of care so simple yet charged with meaning, and Claire felt a rush of emotion, a recognition of the depth of their bond, and a quiet excitement for the future, knowing that they would continue to share such moments, nurturing their relationship, and that their connection had grown stronger in ways that would endure, bringing comfort, hope, and emotional richness to both their lives. The night grew cooler, and Claire wrapped a light shawl around her shoulders, feeling the steady presence of her son beside her, and she realized that while life would always carry its challenges, its losses, and its moments of sorrow, there was also room for healing, laughter, and tender emotional intimacy, and that these moments, though quiet and simple, held the power to transform hearts, strengthen bonds, and remind both parent and child of the enduring value of love and presence. As they finally stood to go inside, the stars reflected on the water seemed to shimmer more brightly, almost like a promise that the future could hold many more days like this, filled with connection, understanding, and the quiet pleasure of being together. And Claire felt an unexpected surge of gratitude, a deep emotional fulfillment that made her chest feel light, her mind at peace, and her heart open to life in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the day in its entirety, the warmth of the sun, the calm of the lake, the laughter and conversation, the gentle presence of Daniel, and she understood that healing, true healing, often came in quiet, simple ways, through shared moments, honest words, and the unspoken acknowledgement of love that did not demand perfection but only presence, care, and openness, and she drifted off to sleep feeling that for the first time in years, she was truly ready to embrace life again, to open her heart to hope, to nurture the bond with her son, and to welcome the gentle, enduring joys that awaited her, knowing that no matter what the future held, she would never be truly alone, and that the lake, the dock, and this afternoon of shared understanding would remain in her heart forever as a reminder that connection, love, and healing are always possible, even after the deepest loss, and that life, in its quiet, tender moments, could still be beautiful.